Money is a concept that emerged at a certain stage in history. We can say that there are things in nature that already exist and those that do not. The things that exist are far fewer than we think. For example, a tree, an apple on a tree, oranges, the sea, rain. These are already present when we come into the world. We find them there. However, many things we think exist from the beginning are not actually there. They are social agreements. Much of what is central to our lives exists due to social consensus. Things like culture, democracy, and family. We know what they are by definition. We live our lives within them. We might even sacrifice our lives for our country or family. But it's important to remember that these are not like an apple on a tree. They are not inherently existing. They exist because we have talked about them, negotiated them, and agreed upon their existence. One of the most fundamental of these is money. Money did not exist inherently in the world. It appeared at a certain stage in history when it was needed as a medium of exchange. Money has several functions, but its primary role is as a medium of exchange. In the early stages of human history, when people started to produce, perhaps from the age of 8 or 9, there was no market economy. People produced mostly for their own consumption. There wasn't a variety of products and services. They gathered and hunted their own food. Therefore, in such an environment, there was no need for a converter like money. However, as history progressed, with the increase in production and specialization, some people became more skilled in certain areas. The quality of some people's products was higher than others. Consequently, individuals began to focus on producing what they were good at and exchange these products with others who excelled in different areas. This led to the accumulation of knowledge and specialization. Instead of everyone producing everything they needed, people started to produce only one type of product and exchanged it in the marketplace. This raised the question of how to determine the value of different items in exchange. There was a need for a standard measure, an abstraction. For instance, how many sheep equal the value of a cow, or how many bushels of wheat equal the value of salt? In such a universe, a common converter was necessary. This is where the concept of money comes in. Money first emerged as a measure and medium of exchange and trade. It also had to serve as a record-keeping tool. Money allowed us to track who owes what and how much. In its initial form, money was not a physical object. It was more like notches on a cave wall or marks on a log in the village square. It was an accounting system with only records, not physical exchange, similar to today's internet banking where no physical money changes hands, but numbers in a bank account represent transactions. However, as trade expanded beyond local communities and regions, a system of receipts had to be developed. If trade was confined to a local area, the same wall or ledger could be used for keeping records. But as trade expanded to other villages and regions, the question of where to keep the records became problematic. How could the records of one village be reconciled with those of another? This led to the development of a system of receipts or tokens. At this stage, items like seashells and shiny stones came to the forefront. They were used as money, but they were not money in the way we understand it today. Consider a coffee shop where plastic tokens are used for purchases. These tokens are not money, but they represent a monetary value. Similarly, seashells and shiny stones were not money, but they served as tokens in this system. However, these tokens started to lose their effectiveness at a certain point in trade. Seashells and shiny stones were not hard to find, and some people started to focus on accumulating these tokens instead of producing goods. This was possible in extended trade networks, but not in local or small-scale trade. As communication between villages broke down, these tokens could circulate inappropriately, leading to fraud and complicating trade. The solution to this problem was the introduction of valuable metals like gold, silver, and copper. These metals were rare and hard to mine and process, making them ideal as a medium of exchange. People preferred producing goods or taking risks in obtaining these metals, rather than trying to mine them directly due to the uncertainty of their location and the risk of not finding anything after years of effort. Thus, precious metals were accepted as money in trade, solving the problems of deception and facilitating smoother transactions. Thus, precious metals were no longer just a medium of exchange or tokens, they became a store and stabilizer of wealth. Accumulating silver coins, for example, meant accumulating potential wealth that could be exchanged for any product at any time. Unlike specific goods like leather or eyeglass frames, which don't have high liquidity, money has maximum liquidity. It's potentially everything and can be exchanged for anything. When I accumulate it, I potentially accumulate all the products in the world and can convert it whenever I want. This was revolutionary for that time, leading to the emergence of wealthy lineages as wealth became accumulable. However, you couldn't accumulate perishables like meat or apples because they would spoil. Durable goods didn't perish but had low liquidity. Before the advent of precious metals, people couldn't accumulate wealth in the same way, and thus capital accumulation only became possible with the emergence of money in this form. But as trade reached a certain scale, precious metals started to become inadequate for commerce. For instance, a Florentine merchant with a massive accumulation of gold florins faced two problems: the risk of theft and the difficulty of transporting these heavy metals over long distances, especially considering the absence of modern transportation like trains or highways. As the number of goods increased, it seemed there was no limit to the production of goods and services. While products and services increased indefinitely, precious metals, chosen for their scarcity, didn't increase at the same pace. Thus, gold and silver, which were initially protective and carrying mediums, turned into a brake on trade. People thought about how to increase the money supply without risking fraud and how to make it more portable. This led to the birth of banking. Initially, banks didn't operate as they do today. Depositors paid a fee to the bank for keeping their money safe. In return, the bank provided a receipt or note, indicating the amount of gold or silver they had deposited. This allowed people to carry their wealth in the form of lightweight paper, transforming long-distance trade. Paper receipts from one bank became acceptable in different cities as banking networks expanded. The interesting thing about paper money is that it wasn't initially trusted as it represented gold or silver. However, with the evolution of banking and finance, these paper notes began to be accepted as money. Thus, the scarcity of precious metals was overcome with the introduction of paper money, representing a significant evolution in the history of finance. However, the idea of paper money also brought new challenges. Initially, paper money was tied to precious metals, but as banks started to issue more notes than they had gold or silver reserves, it led to financial crises. Over time, the link between money and precious metals weakened, especially after the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944, where countries decided to move away from the gold standard, except for the US dollar. This change allowed central banks more flexibility in monetary policy, as they were no longer required to hold gold reserves equivalent to their money supply. Finally, in 1971, the Bretton Woods Agreement ended, and even the US dollar was no longer tied to gold. Paper money became a currency that no longer required backing by any physical commodity, marking a profound shift in the history of money. Now, money is created with no inherent physical value, representing a significant departure from its historical roots. Since 1971, central banks have had the ability to print money at will. Now, any country can print as much money as it wants, without any gold backing. The value of currencies became dependent on the trust in the issuing country, its economic prospects, military strength, investment environment, and the strength of its capital markets. Consequently, currencies began to fluctuate daily based on the economic situation and future expectations of the country that issued them, leading to a new era of free-floating currencies. In this environment, money as we know it today took its current form: paper money, backed by nothing but trust, highly liquid and capable of purchasing anything. However, an unprecedented event occurred in 2008 with the introduction of Bitcoin by Satoshi Nakamoto. For the first time, currency was created without any state involvement. Previously, money was issued and regulated by states or central banks. Bitcoin represented a privatization of money, a concept difficult to grasp initially, as the state typically controls aspects like the use of force, issuing currency, and administering justice. Bitcoin was a departure from traditional money in that it was decentralized and not tied to any physical object. It was like the early days of money, a record on a ledger, but this time in a digital form on the internet. However, it's important not to confuse cryptocurrencies with virtual money. Cryptocurrencies are distinct in that they are not issued by a state, and they use cryptography for security. The introduction of cryptocurrencies and the evolution of money show that as forms of communication, technology, and investment change, so does the nature of money. Money has evolved multiple times in response to changes in technology and society, and it will continue to do so. The future of money, especially in the private sector and with new technological possibilities, is difficult to predict, but it is certain that the transformation of money and its uses will continue at an even faster pace in the future. In the next program, we will explore new forms of money and their implications. Until then, take care.